Hey guys, this is James, and I am joined here for InBetweenIsode number 92 by the notorious Garrett.
Hey guys.
Yeah, so you should follow him on Instagram at islikewater, before I forget. But we are brewing one of your teas today, is that right?
That is right, yeah. So this is a tea I picked up in Taiwan when I was there. James and I were in Taiwan, or James was there for a while. I was there for a couple weeks, and I was going mainly to source Pu'erh. I think we already covered one of my teas I sourced too in a previous episode. But this one is a melon shaped tea that I got from a seller who likes to source from Hong Kong, and he has mainly just like wet stored stuff from there, and he brings it back from Taiwan and from Hong Kong and brings it back to Taiwan and just lets it sit and kind of mellow out. So this was one of the more mellowed out versions, and I really like this one. It is pretty hefty, 500 I think.
Yeah, this is 500 grams at least supposedly, and it feels like 500 grams too.
Yeah.
So if you want a weapon as well, this would be one of the better compressed ones.
Yeah. Put that in your trebuchet, for any zombie invasions that happen in the future. Keep this in mind.
Yeah, there's a great old Cantonese film called Master of the Flying Guillotine. This is kind of shaped like that guillotine. It's basically like a frisbee, and it like comes off and then chops off heads. It'd need to be larger than this. You could maybe chop off small animal heads. But
Nice.
Anyways, we're getting slightly sidetracked here. So, do you like this tea?
I do, yeah. This is one of my favorite teas I picked up. I probably picked up 6 or 7 different teas in Taiwan.
From a couple different places.
Different places, yeah. So not every place had like the same sort of specialty as this guy had. And I would say that this is one of my favorites of those 6 and 7 that I got. So
okay, alright. Well, let's get brewing then, and let's see how this guy is. And so I actually was at the shop with Garrett when we had this tea, and he ended up buying it. So I tasted it in Taiwan, and now I'm tasting it back in the U.S. So it's always interesting. One of the topics that's challenging when you're buying in store, and especially when you're buying while you're traveling, is you're really not, you have some idea of what you're getting, but it's hard to know exactly what you're getting because the water they're using is different. You're obviously in a very different social context, and the brewing could be dramatically different. The people know the teas, so they could, for instance, if the tea is overly wet, rinse a few extra times or do an extra long rinse. And so when you get back and you're brewing under your own parameters, some people would be like, what the heck? This is like a different tasting tea. What has your experiences been with this tea?
This tea, I've definitely, when I brought it home, I was brewing a lot lighter than I was getting in Taiwan. And I would say that the wetness is pretty much spot on, and from what I experienced there, like the storage flavors, I like to do one rinse, and we've already did a single steep here. So I would say it's pretty consistent for me.
Okay.
And compared to my other teas that maybe were a little more raw, a little less age on them, or a little less wet storage, this is kind of nice.
Okay, so this has been similar to your experiences in Taiwan. So very smooth, very soft, very creamy. And this is supposedly a 1990s tea, is that right?
That is correct. Late 1990s, I'd say. There's always that language difference too, so you never 100%. And
of course it's Pu'erh, so you can never trust everything that you hear.
Exactly.
I mean, this is from 1,000,000-year-old trees.
Million.
Millennial.
Totally.
Yeah. And looking at the leaf contents, it's generally a little bit smaller leaves for this, so we'd expect it to hit pretty quick. It's pretty active. I already like this steep. We did a rinse and an initial infusion, as Garrett mentioned, before the camera started rolling. And I definitely already like this second infusion more than the first infusion we had. I think a little bit more of the storage is off of it already, and starting to get more into the tea contents.
Right, yeah. I'm definitely getting a little more depth with with kind of the body of the tea versus the first steep, which is to be expected, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And so this being like a 90s tea and just tea, aged tea being very expensive in the West, how do you think the price, we touched on this in our previous episode, do you think this price was, the price you paid for this was fair? Or do you think, compared to the West, if it's good or is it bad? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I would say the price is pretty spot on. And if I were to acquire something similar, storage, sourcing, I would say that it would probably be twice as much from like a Western facing vendor. And so I'm pretty content with the purchase itself. It was one of my more expensive teas, but it also was one of my largest. So I haven't actually done the math quite for this specific tea, but I think it was like 3,500 NTD.
And so for 500 grams, so we're looking at like a little bit over 20 cents to 25 cents per gram.
Got it.
Which would be a pretty reasonable thing. And what is the ratio we're using in our setup right here?
This is a little over 5 grams and a 70 milliliter shib. So that is what's up right here. Yeah. Usually when I'm at home, I brew maybe even a little stronger than this. But so far, so good. Yeah,
there you go. Pretty dark. And in the shop, I will say that we brewed even stronger than that.
Yes, yeah, it was pretty intense.
Yeah. The guy's brewing was very curious, was very interesting because it's just so different from ours, but he would usually give it a lighter first infusion, and by light I mean like average light. It's not like super light.
Yeah.
It maybe should brew up like a lighter color red. And then he would give it a super long one, and then depending on the tea would look just like black.
Right.
Yeah.
And be like drinking tar or something like that.
Yeah. Really delicious tar though.
Very good tar. Yeah.
Cheers, guys. So some earth. I like the body on it. It's like nice and oily.
So this one I think was about 10 seconds, maybe a little less.
What do you think about this? What notes are you getting off of this?
I'm getting almost like a kind of like a weedy, grainy note off of this, on top of that traditional kind of chocolatey bitterness that I might even associate with a ripe tea, more or less. And in the past, I've had this tea, I always describe it more less cooling, more warming, from a kind of a medicinal standpoint.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I can really feel the tea, like the sweetness is immediately just like taken over most of my mouth. A little bit in the throat, but still mainly like my mouth.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'm just going to let this guy kind of brew up here, or get some extra hot water.
And this is sort of a tea that, like, this might be, like, not really advanced advice for some of you more advanced drinkers, but, like, this is not a tea that you would brew at green tea temperatures. Is that right?
Yeah, this one you definitely would want to hit hard versus soft and cold.
So would Yixing be a pretty appropriate brewing device for a tea like this?
I would say so, yeah. So a thicker walled Yixing teapot that just has a little room for the leaves to expand outwards, I think would be excellent for something like this, and especially if you have one that's already kind of got that you use for maybe a little bit of age stuff if you're into it.
Yeah.
Which is, pretty typical advice, but
yeah,
definitely apt for this tea. Yeah,
I would agree with that. So you brew this tea at home in both gaiwan and clay sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. So I picked up a wood fired clay teapot from the same vendor, and I've been using mostly that one, and it's kind of a traditional shape in terms of like what traditional Yixing teapots are like. There's a little bit of glaze on the outside, so. I don't know if that has any effect on the thermodynamics, like holding heat more than a traditional, like, a little more porous Yixing. But.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd have to be a separate comparison episode, I would
right.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good drink.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So a lot of wood, maybe a little bit of creaminess. I don't get fruits off of this or anything like that.
I agree. Yeah, no fruitiness. We have no orchard.
Yeah, more woods and earths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it continues to be very solid as far as just like steep to steep. Maybe slightly less viscosity. It's still pretty thick though, I would say overall.
Yeah. I'm going to try pushing it this time and see what happens.
Cool. Yeah, let's see. Kind of like the guy does, except we would need to forget about it for another 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not overwhelmingly dark, but it is darker than it was.
Yeah, nice kind of like burgundy in there a little.
Nice word choice.
Yeah.
And so, Garrett, we have to ask the classic question.
Okay.
What time of day would you drink this tea?
Well, I would say this is a late afternoon tea.
So more like a 4:30 p.m.?
Yeah, maybe 3:45 to 4:30 p.m. tea. And I say that just because it's definitely smoother. I think this isn't really a great tea to start the day out with because it's not kind of these later steeps have kind of evened out, I would say, and it's not as the energy off of it I don't get a whole lot of, so it's not as like active.
Okay, so it'd be an appropriate tea to drink later in the day.
Yeah, kind of mellow you out.
Yeah, as opposed to like a ripe or something. You could sort of you do this instead of a ripe.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Smells earthier. I smell a little bit more vegetal notes off of this. Like fermented vegetables. Thicker, creamier, a little bit of vegetalness. Maybe even a little bit of fruit. Interesting. It's quite different, actually, depending on how you brew it. So it's interesting to mess around with these parameters.
Right. Kind of pushing this one here.
Yep. So it's, again, brewing a fairly similar color. What do you prefer? Do you prefer it at sort of like this high intensity, or do you prefer the tea sort of how you were originally doing it?
It's a hard question. I think it's kind of what I'm feeling day to day. I would almost say like the high intensity I think is good for me right now. Just because I like to get that, I want to get a little more flavor.
And we're brewing also at 9 a.m. in the morning, so this is not at the ideal 3:45 drink time.
No. So I would say that, pushing this one is definitely a little, it's where it's at right now for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting to push these little bit older teas because it gives them a little bit of a kick, and it can really make it quite strong in some ways. Like, you get some actual bitter or astringent notes, which you're not really used to when you're drinking soup this color.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. What are you getting off of these stronger steeps?
I would definitely say that I'm getting a little more bitter, a little bit of that vegetalness. I'm getting some of the just lingering flavors in my cheeks.
Yeah, me too.
My gums area up there. I would say, apart from that, it's also kind of consistent with the earlier steeps for me, with a little bit of that chocolatiness and the grainy note that I was getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And as far as like sort of lasting effects, I'm starting to feel more in the throat, just as far as like sweetness there. So that's really nice. And I think that pretty much concludes this episode. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you.
Garrett. Follow him on Instagram where he posts sporadically.
Yeah.
But every now and then you will get a wonderful shot of this melon Jingua until Garrett drinks it all, which could be a while. This is a rather large melon.
This is true. So yeah, definitely. I'm hoping to post more often, and exploring the full amount of my collection and showing you guys what I've got and connecting more there.
Yeah.
So
and we'll have to bring you on for some more aged Pu'erh or some more Hong Kong style, because that tends to be, I know, what you drink.
This is true.
So we will see you guys next time. Cheers.